Professor Rudak adjusted his spectral enhancers, the avian-like feathers around his neck ruffling slightly as he gazed at the approaching blue planet through the education vessel's viewing port. 12 students from across the galaxy stood behind him, their various biological forms creating a mosaic of evolutionary diversity in the ship's observation deck. "Behold," Rudak announced, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who had taught interplanetary biology for over 200 cycles. "Earth, not particularly remarkable in galactic politics, barely a footnote in interstellar trade agreements. And yet," he paused for effect, "the only planet classified as a Class 13 Deathworld." A ripple of nervous chatter spread among the students. Most had assumed this field trip would be little more than a formality, an easy credit toward their xenobiology degrees. Lamoureux, covered in thick blue fur adapted for the freezing environment of Tundaris, snorted dismissively. "Professor, with all respect, my species survived ice ages that lasted millennia. How dangerous could this place be?" Hizzer, tall and willowy with skin that absorbed moisture directly from the air, added, "The Galactic Educational Board wouldn't approve a trip that put us in actual danger, right?" Athera, whose semi-transparent body revealed the pulsing of their 3 hearts, spoke with the clinical precision characteristic of their species. "Statistically speaking, Class 13 designation suggests a 98.7% fatality rate for unprepared visitors. However, we are prepared. Therefore, the danger is largely theoretical." Professor Rudak merely smiled, the expression barely visible beneath his beak-like mouth. Theory and practice often maintain a respectable distance from each other, particularly on Earth. He turned back to the viewport. "We'll be landing momentarily. Please secure yourselves, and remember, this is merely an observational trip. No one leaves the protective fields without my explicit permission." As the ship began its descent toward a remote desert landing site, carefully chosen to avoid human detection, Rudak couldn't help but feel a familiar excitement. Teaching was about creating moments of realization, and nothing created realization quite like Earth. The ship's AI announced their imminent landing, and the students braced themselves for what they assumed would be a routine educational experience. They had no idea what awaited them. The landing was smooth, as expected from a vessel equipped with the finest gravimetric stabilizers in the galaxy. The students gathered their observation equipment with the confident efficiency of beings who had never truly been challenged by their environments. "Before we disembark," Professor Rudak announced, "I need to explain several safety protocols specific to Earth." Zelb, a creature composed primarily of crystalline structures, sighed audibly. "Professor, we've all studied the standard protocols for Class 10 and above environments. Is this really necessary?" Rudak ignored the interruption. "First and foremost, your environmental suits will protect you from most of Earth's biological hazards. However, they cannot protect you from its most fundamental challenge." With that cryptic statement, he made a gesture toward the ship's control panel. "I am now deactivating the ship's internal gravity compensators to match Earth's natural gravitational pull." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every student collapsed to the floor with varying degrees of distress. Lamoureux's thick limbs trembled under his own weight. Hizzer's tall frame crumpled like a wilting plant. Athera's transparent body flattened against the floor, their 3 hearts visibly struggling to maintain circulation. What is happening?" gasped Zub, a normally gelatinous being whose body was now spread across the floor like spilled liquid. "Gravity," Rudak stated simply, standing with apparent ease despite the crushing force. Years of field research on Earth had led him to adapt his own physiology for these visits. Earth's gravitational pull is approximately 2.5 times the galactic standard. This is your first lesson. On Earth, even the most fundamental physical force is trying to kill you. "I can't move my limbs," complained Mithri, whose 6 appendages lay uselessly around her torso. "You will adapt," Rudak assured them, though his tone suggested this adaptation would not be pleasant. "Or you will remain in the ship. Either way, this is merely the beginning of your education." After 30 excruciating minutes of gravitational acclimation exercises, the students could finally stand, though not without considerable effort. Their movements were labored, their breathing heavy. Even the simplest task required conscious effort. Now, Rudak announced, activating the ship's exterior monitoring systems. Let's observe our landing environment. The screens flickered to life, displaying a stark desert landscape. Heat waves rippled across sand dunes that stretched to the horizon. Current exterior temperature, the ship's AI announced, is 4 degrees Celsius. That's quite cold, Vexna observed, her scaled skin contracting slightly at the thought. Indeed, Rudak nodded. For now, the professor led them through a series of observations about the desert ecosystem, pointing out the remarkable adaptations of Earth's desert-dwelling creatures. The students gradually relaxed, finding the academic exercise familiar and comforting after the gravitational shock. 3 Earth hours later, as they continued their studies, the ship's AI made another announcement. Current exterior temperature is 38 degrees Celsius. That can't be right, Athera objected, their logical mind rejecting the data. That would indicate a temperature increase of 34 degrees in just 3 hours. No habitable planet has such extreme fluctuations. Earth does, Rudak stated simply. This is your second lesson. Earth's climate doesn't merely change seasonally. It changes daily, hourly, sometimes within minutes. What was freezing this morning is now hot enough to damage many of your biological systems. The students stared at the monitors in disbelief, watching as small desert creatures took shelter from the brutal midday heat. A planet of extremes, Rudak continued. Now, who would like to take our first short excursion outside the ship? Despite their earlier confidence, the students remained silent. Perhaps we should move to our second observation site, Rudak suggested, interpreting their silence correctly. The Amazon rainforest offers a very different perspective on Earth's biological diversity. The relief was palpable as the ship lifted off. The students had already begun revising their preconceptions about this unassuming blue planet. The journey to the Amazon was brief, the ship's advanced propulsion system allowing them to reach the other side of the planet in minutes. As they approached the vast green expanse of the rainforest, the students' scientific curiosity began to overcome their initial shock. "It's beautiful," Hizzer whispered, naturally drawn to the lush vegetation below. "So much water, so much life." Rudak nodded approvingly. The Amazon basin contains more biodiversity than entire solar systems in some parts of the galaxy. It is indeed a paradise of evolutionary creativity. The ship descended gently into a small clearing, its cloaking technology ensuring they remained undetected by any nearby humans. The exterior screens showed a verdant wonderland, towering trees, colorful birds, and a symphony of natural sounds. The temperature here is a consistent 28 degrees Celsius, with 92% humidity, the ship's AI reported. Atmospheric composition is within acceptable parameters for all student species. "This seems much more hospitable," Lamoureux observed, his thick fur less of a burden in the ship's now adjusted internal environment. "It appears optimal for biological exploration," agreed Athera. Rudak activated the ship's shield projection, creating a protected pathway from the vessel to a small section of the forest. "We will take a brief excursion. Environmental suits on, observation tools ready. Stay within the shielded area at all times." The students eagerly donned their protective gear, excitement overriding their earlier caution. This was why they had come, to observe one of the most biologically diverse planets in the known galaxy. As they stepped outside, the sensory experience was overwhelming. The air was thick with moisture and alive with sounds. Birds calling, insects buzzing, leaves rustling. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in dappled patterns, creating an almost magical atmosphere. For several minutes, the students were entranced, recording data and observations with enthusiasm. Hizzer was particularly delighted, their skin absorbing the ambient moisture with visible pleasure. Athera, unnecessary. The students were already retreating in chaos, their scientific decorum abandoned in the face of Earth's microscopic assault. Once safely inside, the decontamination protocols were activated, removing the various Earth organisms that had attached themselves to the students. Medical scans revealed that several students had been exposed to pathogens unknown to galactic medicine. "Ow!" demanded Athera, their logical composure thoroughly disturbed. "Our shields are designed to stop micrometeorites. How could these primitive organisms penetrate them?" "Earth life," Rudak explained while administering treatments, "has spent billions of years evolving to overcome every possible defense. The mosquitoes that bit you have mouth parts specifically evolved to penetrate tough skin. The leeches secrete anticoagulants that your suits interpreted as harmless liquid. The fungus that attached to Zelb metabolizes silicon. It thought your crystalline structure was food." "This is insanity," Lamoureux growled, his fur now partially shaved where jungle insects had burrowed into it. "No environment should have this many hostile organisms." "And yet," Rudak countered, "this is considered one of Earth's most beautiful and precious ecosystems. Humans actively work to preserve it." The students fell silent, struggling to comprehend a species that would protect an environment so fundamentally dangerous. "I believe," Rudak continued, "you are beginning to understand why Earth is classified as it is. But we've only scratched the surface. Our next observation will focus on the dominant species themselves." "The humans?" Hizur asked, still recovering from the leeches that had been so attracted to their moisture-rich biology. "Yes, and for safety reasons, we'll observe them remotely from high atmosphere." No student objected to this precaution. The ship rose high above the cloud cover, positioning itself over a landmass the onboard database identified as Florida. Professor Rudak activated the high-resolution observation systems. "Florida represents an interesting case study," Rudak explained. "It's a region where many of Earth's environmental hazards converge. Hurricanes, flooding, dangerous wildlife. And yet humans not only live there, but seek it out as a desirable location." The screens displayed aerial views of coastlines, urban areas, and wild spaces where alligators basked in swamps. "I've prepared a sequence of observation footage," Rudak continued. "These are unaltered recordings from various Earth information sources, showing typical human interactions with their environment." The first clip showed a human male wading into water where a large reptilian predator, identified as an alligator, was clearly visible. "Is this some form of ritual suicide?" Zelb asked, their crystalline structure still showing traces of antifungal treatment. "No," Rudak answered. "Watch." To the student's horror, the human began wrestling with a massive predator, eventually subduing it through some combination of strength and technique that seemed impossible given the physical disparities involved. "This can't be typical behavior," Athera objected. "This must be a specialized warrior or a trained professional." Rudak shook his head. "The database classifies this individual as a Florida man, a colloquial term for civilians in this region who regularly engage in such activities. This is considered unusual behavior by human standards, but not exceptionally so." The professor advanced to the next clip, showing humans deliberately approaching a structure identified as a wasp nest, poking it with sticks, and then fleeing while being pursued by swarms of stinging insects. "But what?" Zub's gelatinous form rippled in confusion. "For entertainment, apparently," Rudak replied. Clip after clip showed humans engaging with Earth's most dangerous elements, jumping from great heights attached to elastic cords, swimming with large marine predators, handling venomous snakes, climbing sheer rock faces without safety equipment, and intentionally consuming plants and animals known to contain toxins. "This isn't just recklessness," Mithri observed, her 6 limbs wrapped protectively around herself. "There's a pattern here." "Yes," Rudak nodded approvingly. "What do you observe?" After a moment of silent analysis, Athera spoke. "They're testing themselves, deliberately exposing themselves to danger to prove they can overcome it." "Precisely," Rudak confirmed. "Humans don't merely survive Earth's dangers. They actively seek them out, challenge them, even as recreation. The final clip showed a human settlement in the aftermath of a disaster. Buildings destroyed, infrastructure collapsed. Yet the humans were rebuilding, working together with evident determination. This was taken after a hurricane, a massive storm system that regularly devastates coastal regions, Rudak explained. Humans don't abandon these areas. They rebuild, knowing another storm will eventually come. The observation deck was silent as the students processed what they had seen. They're insane, Lamoureux finally declared. We're the most highly evolved species we've ever encountered, Rudak countered. This is your final and most important lesson. Humans are the most dangerous thing on Earth. Not because they're predators, but because they've evolved alongside everything else on this death planet and emerged dominant. But their technology is primitive, Hizzer objected. They haven't even achieved unified planetary governance. Yet they survive, thrive, on a planet that would kill any of us within days without our advanced technology, Rudak pointed out. And they do it with comparative biological fragility. No natural armor, no venom, limited strength, modest speed. Their advantage is here. He tapped his head. Adaptability, problem-solving, and a psychological resilience that borders on the pathological by galactic standards. The students gathered in the ship's conference area, still processing everything they had witnessed. Earth's gravity, its temperature extremes, its aggressive biology, and most of all, its dominant species with their inexplicable behavior. I've studied 15 planetary systems, Mithri said, her voice subdued, and I've never encountered a species like humans. The galactic xenobiology texts barely mention them, Zelb added. They're described as a localizing intelligence of moderate technological development. That seems inadequate now, because those texts focus on technology and social organization, Rudak explained. By those measures, humans are indeed unremarkable. But what they fail to capture is the fundamental difference in evolutionary pressure. He activated a holographic display showing comparative planetary conditions. Most intelligent species evolve on worlds that present modest challenges. Resources are usually abundant, environmental conditions stable. Intelligence develops as a means of complex social organization, art, philosophy. The display shifted to Earth's data. Humans evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. Their intelligence developed primarily as a survival mechanism, a way to overcome biological limitations through tool use, cooperation, and risk calculation. But that doesn't explain their apparent desire to seek out danger, Athera objected. Doesn't it? Rudak countered. Consider, for most of their evolutionary history, humans needed to take risks to survive, hunting dangerous animals, exploring unknown territories, testing which plants were edible. Those who could face danger, calculate risks, and overcome challenges passed on their genes. So they're addicted to risk, Hizzer suggested. In a sense, Rudak nodded. Many human recreational activities simulate the dangers their ancestors faced as survival necessities. They climb mountains because their bodies and minds are optimized for overcoming obstacles. They deliberately expose themselves to controlled danger because their psychology rewards it. That's why they're respected by the Galactic Council, Zub realized aloud. Not because of their technology, but because of their psychological makeup. Precisely, Rudak confirmed. Humans are the only known species that advances fastest during crises. When faced with existential threats, other species typically retreat, conserve, or perish. Humans innovate, adapt, overcome. This makes them uniquely valuable despite their primitive development stage. And dangerous, Lamoureux added darkly. Yes, Rudak acknowledged, which is why Earth remains under observation rather than open contact protocols. The Council is concerned about how humans might react to certain galactic realities. The students fell silent again, contemplating the implications. I need to revise my thesis, Athera finally said. I was examining spacefaring psychology through environmental determinism, but I never considered environmental hostility as a positive evolutionary pressure. Similar revelations seemed to be occurring among the other students, exactly as Rudak had hoped. This was why he advocated for these field trips despite the bureaucratic challenges. No amount of academic study could replace direct observation. You will each prepare an individual report on what you've learned, Rudak instructed. Focus not just on the biological and environmental factors, but on how they've shaped human psychology and social structures. As the ship prepared for departure, the students dispersed to their private study areas, many already dictating notes or reviewing footage from their observation devices. Rudak remained on the observation deck, gazing down at the blue planet one last time before their return journey. Earth appeared so peaceful from this distance, its swirling white clouds concealing the evolutionary crucible beneath. He remembered his own first visit as a student, the same shock of recognition that his current students were now experiencing. The revelation that had shaped his entire academic career. The understanding that intelligence itself could take radically different forms based on the pressures that created it. The ship's engines engaged, beginning their ascent from Earth's gravity well. One by one, the students returned to the observation deck, their expressions thoughtful as they watched the planet recede. Professor, Hizzer ventured, if Earth created humans, what might other death worlds produce? An excellent question, Rudak replied. There are theories about planets with even more extreme conditions, but none have produced space-capable species that we know of. Yet, added Lamoureux. Yet Rudak agreed. As Earth became just another blue dot among the stars, Vexna asked the question Rudak had been waiting for. How can humans bear to live there, knowing what's trying to kill them every day? That, Rudak said, is the most profound question of all. And the answer is what makes humans unique in the galaxy. They don't merely bear it, they embrace it. Where we see danger, they see challenge. Where we see hostility, they see opportunity. That mindset, Rudak continued, the acceptance of risk, the willingness to face danger rather than avoid it, that may be the highest form of adaptation. Not physical features, not technology, but psychology. The ability to look at a hostile universe and say, I accept the challenge. The students pondered this as the ship accelerated toward the jump gate that would return them to safer, more civilized regions of the galaxy. Next year, Rudak announced as they prepared for the jump, we might visit the acid lakes of Vuvian. A collective groan rose from the students, but there was something different in it now, a note of anticipation rather than dread. They had begun to understand what it meant to embrace challenge rather than avoid it. As the stars streaked into lines around them, Rudak smiled to himself. Another successful field trip. Another group of students who would never look at the galaxy, or themselves, quite the same way again. They had come to study Earth. They were leaving with a new understanding of what intelligence, adaptation, and evolution truly meant. And perhaps, just perhaps, with a newfound respect for a species that called a death world home. Professor Rudak made a final entry in his teaching log. Field trip number 37 to Sol. 3. Earth students successfully experienced gravitational stress, environmental extremes, biological hazards, and human psychological observation. All survived. All fundamentally changed in their understanding. Recommendation. Continue annual field trips despite administrative objections. There is no substitute for direct observation of Earth and its dominant species. End report. He closed the log and joined his students for the journey home, already planning next year's expedition. Perhaps it was time to let them observe human children at play that would truly challenge their understanding of risk assessment. The education vessel streaked through hyperspace, leaving behind a small blue planet where billions of humans went about their daily lives, working, playing, creating, exploring, and occasionally wrestling alligators, blissfully unaware that they were considered the most fascinating and terrifying species in the galaxy. On Earth, a Florida man looked up at the night sky, briefly wondering if something had flashed above the atmosphere, then shrugged and returned to his task of coaxing a venomous snake out of his garage with nothing but a stick and stubborn determination. Just another day on the galaxy's only Class 13 death world. Just another day for humanity. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, 12 alien students were finally beginning to understand why.